All right, so welcome to PORB. I think this is episode 37. Today's special for a couple reasons. One, that was the first actual intro I've ever done. And two, I have a guest, my longtime friend, fellow fitness person and trainer, Mr. Cyrus. I've never said his last name out loud. Moghadassi?
Sure.
Moghadassi?
Yeah, Moghadassi.
How do you actually say it?
Moghadassi.
Moghadassi. Okay. Welcome. Yay.
Hi, everybody.
How's it going, man?
It's going good. Good, busy week, but good. How about you?
Yeah, same. Yeah, but I'm still just doing everything for the most part on Zoom.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I've known Cyrus, I don't know. How long have we known each other? A long time.
It's coming up on, I was in Pierce College, so 16 to 17 years, something in that neighborhood.
Man.
Graham was we were both wee children back in the day.
Just little tykes. 17 years ago when we were 5.
Yeah.
Cyrus has a gym in Woodland Hills, right?
Correct.
And what's the name?
The Legion Gym.
The Legion Gym. And I don't know, maybe tell whoever's listening about it for a little bit.
Sure. So it's a personal training gym. Not very big, but kind of private. I think upscale. I mean, I don't know if that's if I can say that.
I mean, I haven't been there in person, but the pictures are pretty gorgeous, man.
Thank you. I took a long time to get a spot and to pick the equipment that I liked, and I'm, knock on wood, kind of lucky that it's this size because it's very easy to curate the kind of trainers I have, and they're all people I've known and worked with for years. So it's a really good family, vibe.
Nice, man.
And we try to mix the idea of making it fun and clean, but also kind of kicking everyone's butt as much as it's safe to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. That clean part is like something I'm constantly telling people about, whether they're looking for like a gym or a martial arts school or whatever. I'm like, I know like the idea of like a rusty, dirty place is super romantic. But yeah, don't go to any place that's filthy or gross. It's not smart. It's so dumb.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where I agree. There's something cool about like this torture dungeon, like old Texas gym where the bars are from the 40s, but
right.
But like, there's also nothing cool about like getting like a staph infection or whatever. Like,
yeah, exactly. Tetanus and staph is, it's not. It doesn't need to be a part of your training.
Right. At least not the kind of training I do. So.
Same here. I mean, I've seen it a lot. I've had people like literally say to me like, I think I'm gonna look for something a little more like underground or like. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, just like something you get when you see gyms that are kind of like run down. I kind of want that. And I'm like, that, okay. Right. I mean, good luck.
Yeah. I think they mean like, they're trying to say like rustic or vintage, but even if I think vintage, I want something high quality vintage. I don't want a piece of crap old watch. If I wanted an old watch, I want it to work really well.
I mean, I've trained in martial arts schools where there was like, oh yeah, don't touch that wire in the bathroom. Watch out for the nail in the floor. Like, it's like, this is not okay.
No.
This is not okay here.
No.
So anyway, if you're in the area, Woodland Hills, check out the Legion Gym. You got like a website and stuff?
Yeah, you just find us on Instagram, just the _Legion_gym. We do have the legiongym.com, but we don't use it that much, so it's probably not even up to date info. But yeah, we're small, clean, and it's a pretty fun situation. And given the challenges of COVID, I think we've been really, really lucky to have a small place that's much easier to manage. So that's crazy. It's wild out there.
It is, man. It's crazy. I just, real quick. I mean, Cyrus knows his shit. Great trainer. Great teacher, super cool guy. If you're in the area, definitely, if you're looking for a gym, that'd be a good place.
Well, thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. So there was a reason that, like, when we initially decided to do this, I had posted something on Twitter and then Instagram, and this was kind of like the impetus for this to happen. And it was, I don't know, it was something to the effect of food is neither good nor bad, and you are neither good nor bad for eating or not eating it. And then you had some thoughts, so let's talk about it. Let's get into it.
Sure. So first off, I want to say it's a little bit of a wink that I want to be kind of, I don't want to say devil's advocate, but I'm going to take a viewpoint that I have and intentionally push it a little farther for the sake of having healthy, oppositional conversation. Because fundamentally, you want to get really detailed. Even concepts of good and bad become pretty weird. And that's a whole series of philosophical conversation. But on a simple term, there's sort of two ways I would look at it. So when we say, is food good or bad? So the first way I would look at it is, do I mean good or bad in serving whatever need I have of the food? So whether that's my nutrition or my excitement or just the caloric need, could it be good or bad in that regard? And then the second would be like an ethical good or bad. Is there food that is unethical or ethical? I would say on both of those fronts, certain foods could be considered one of those. So for example, if my need for food is to replenish energy because I'm really, really tired because I had a bad cold or I had a really rough workout or I didn't sleep because my daughter was up all night, then there are some foods that are going to be, I'll say, more good than bad or more bad than good. So for example, maybe a little piece of fruit or a nice quality egg would be more on the good side, whereas perhaps something like really low quality donuts or really, really cheap fast food might be less on the good side. And then if we're looking at the kind of opposite, so the ethical quandary would be, there's one ethic of, killing or not killing, which also becomes complicated because just because it's not made of an animal doesn't mean animals weren't killed to make a certain food. Assuming that we're even saying, even if we're saying animals should or shouldn't be killed in the first place, but that's a whole other situation. But then what I look at is what is the potential or theoretical, maybe even actual net impact on the world of producing a certain food. So one of my rallying cries against fast food is that it's in its growth, whether we're talking about the vegetables or the meat, it's destroying soil in a way that doesn't get regenerated well. Then it's being, quote unquote processed, however people want to use that term. Even if we're not talking about GMOs, it's just being malformed with many cows to make one burger or many crappy quality wheat to make the buns. And then it's going to a company that has very questionable business practices. Then it's going to underpaid workers. Then it's going to trucks that very pollute. And then finally it's going to go to an end user at an artificially low price to create damage to their health. So in the situation like that, I'm not holding the employee at harm because they A, might not know, and B, not have choice. Even the customers often don't. But I would say that food in and of itself is not a good food because it's kind of like an eight link chain. And every one of those links is problematic in some way.
I actually don't disagree with any of that. The stance I have on it is that food is either objectively healthy or objectively unhealthy, and then the problem comes in where the term good or bad. When somebody eats something, they say, "I was good today." They eat like a salad or whatever, and they eat fast food, for example. They say, "I was bad today." Those things over and over and over, the association with good or bad is clear, even if, we have varying degrees on if that even matters or what that is, as far as the universe is concerned. But like fundamentally as a society, we have basic ideas of good and bad. So we're kind of constantly repeating this mantra of like, I was either good or I was either bad based on this one action that I did that it does not actually serve either of those statements. And then when I think so much about like just that language constantly being repeated, and I talk about like mantras a lot with my clients, is that Like, for example, like when you got people in your gym and you're doing a session with them, and then they either, let's say they can't lift whatever weight, or they can't do a movement as well as they want, or they have to quit or take a break. And then almost all the time they go like, oh, fuck. Or like they get super hard on themselves and start tearing themselves down internally. And then you have to be like, hey, you're doing great. Let's go. Come on. You're propping them back up. But their internal monologue is, I'm bad because I couldn't do this thing. And that's like kind of like the bedrock of everything else they're basing their identity on, is like, well, at the bottom, I'm bad. So when I think about, I work with a lot of like CEOs and these people who have tremendous success financially and in whatever business they're in, but they struggle so deeply with eating and exercise. And usually what they're told when they can't eat well or exercise consistently is that they have no willpower, they have no discipline, and they're bad because of it. So there's this like thing, if I don't eat this, I'm bad. If I do eat this, I'm bad or good or whatever. So then what I try to tell them is like, you don't lack discipline and you don't lack willpower. Look at what you've achieved. This immediately disproves any thought that you don't have those qualities. Why it's a problem for you with food and exercise, and this is like, I don't know, 99% of the time, there's early trauma from junior high. It's always junior high, and then your parents. And with the parents, it's always like, you ate this and it's bad for you, and you're bad because you ate it, or you didn't eat enough and now that's bad, or when you do eat something well, good job. So there's all this like emotional attachment to the words good and bad, and that my adult people in their 50s and 60s are like, I was good today, I was bad today. Like they want a gold star, So I think on an emotional level, those terms can get like really complicated for people, and then it makes it harder to be consistent and progress, because you go like, oh, I was bad, so I guess I'm bad. I'm inherently bad because I ate a burger. It's like, no, that food is unhealthy for you. I mean, like fast food burger. Sure. But like, you're still a good, objectively good person. Like, unless you're out there kicking puppies and poking people with pins and shit like that, you're okay. Right. So mine is like more of the like, just the emotional message that you're sending yourself by repeating a word of, based on some arbitrary action.
Yeah, that I think is totally true, because I think a lot of people, when we look at probably the most common like addiction models of like alcohol, drugs, tobacco, whatever, generally, and at least my feeling, and I think probably most people would agree, I don't think someone is bad because they are hardwired to have a higher disposition for addiction. And probably most of us have some potential for addiction in something. Totally. Just some of it might be harmless or not very visible or very socially unacceptable. But, if someone to me has a problem with alcohol, I don't think that's a bad person because they have a problem with alcohol. I think that's a person that might be good, might be bad, incidentally could have a problem with alcohol. Right. I think where things like food and sexual addiction become tricky is food is, and to some extent, I would say sex are things that are pretty much part of everybody's life. Yeah. And they're kind of hard to avoid or not have some need for. So it's tricky, because imagine if all available beverages were as dangerous as alcohol, or most were, that's a tough world to live in. And
they are.
Yeah.
Soda, that's what soda is. Yeah.
Yeah. And these days, most available food isn't really in the service of one's health. So I agree. I don't put a big ethical negative, and I do think people need to be careful saying I was good or bad, as opposed to, I could have been better to myself today.
Right.
But
or just as a statement, like the food I ate today was not healthy. You know what I mean? Like if you take the emotion out of it and just it's a statement of fact.
Yes.
Because that emotion part of it like fucks people's whole trajectory up. Like,
yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's also, I think, especially when you get a lot of fitness people who talk about their discipline and I'm going to go after it and no days off, it does a real disservice that it's almost suggesting everybody who doesn't do that thing, quote unquote, perfectly, is somehow weaker, which is to suggest
That's right.
many millions. Now, if it was 1% of the population couldn't eat right, I'd say, yeah, maybe it is just a weakness of character, maybe.
Yeah.
But when it's at this point, especially with the food availability we have in the States, probably the majority of people don't have what almost anybody would consider healthy diets.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a bunch of weak people.
It's not. It's certainly not.
No, it's a very cheap, very addictive, heavily marketed, psychologically funneled system that is that. And I don't want to say that like system, like it's some kind of, big conspiracy, just because I happen to be generally anti-corporate and not a huge fan of capitalism, doesn't also mean that I think everything is some conspiracy to get us. So conspiracy, people want to make more money and sell cheaper products. That's
it's definitely it's not a conspiracy.
Right.
But the system evolved and was designed to exploit poor people, to exploit, mainly poor people. That's the thing. Right. You take away someone's money or ability to earn money through, whatever, racism or everything like this. And then they're left with this thing that makes them unhealthy, makes them dependent on the system, makes them unhappy, makes them stuck in this shitty job. Like I 100%. So it's not a conspiracy, but it is a system. And it's like everybody's a victim of that system one way or the other.
Oh yeah. It's super. I mean, it's all hyper addictive, hyper cheap. I think the time where it becomes a little trickier is, as often is the case, when anybody learns more and more about, let's say, the food system and the supply side and how it all works. And, even though there are very different viewpoints on what is or isn't healthy, whatever someone wants to subscribe to, when they learn it, you're now burdened that you can't really unlearn it. So to me, an ordinary, even smart, even successful, even nice, kind-hearted person who just hasn't spent the time kind of grappling these issues, to me, it's a little bit more, let's say, understandable if they know they're not making a necessarily healthy choice, but they don't think about the damage that McDonald's might cause. Whereas I kind of joke, it's not even a joke, I kind of suggest to my clients, we have this image of McDonald's being the quintessential American kind of company. And I always say there's actually nothing more anti-American than fast food. It physically, sorry, it's my text. It literally destroys the fabric of America, from person to income inequality to the actual physical soil. I mean, it would be, if you want to win a war, you don't have to send in bullets anymore. You could just go drop a bunch of franchise restaurants to a place and just sit back and wait until they can't physically fight you. And
it, well, in another sense, like absolutely, like, what you're saying, like McDonald's and corporations like them are super anti-American as far as like the values that people say America is.
Yes.
Like it's the antithesis of that, but like for the reality of what America is, it's 100% on brand.
Yes, it is. Yes,
you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
Chew up people, use them. They're a commodity to further your goals or your power. It's win
at all costs, even if you have to scorch the earth to win.
Yeah. Ultimately, like when the earth blows up because of what I'm doing, I still was the best right before it happened.
Yes, it blew up because of me.
I win.
Yes,
I'm the winner. I did it.
Yes.
Yeah. But like, so in that sense, like, if the food is an agent of evil and evil is bad, then by proxy the food is bad.
Right.
Yeah. But like, which I agree with. Right. Just on like a day-to-day scale, like a day-to-day level, I constantly am trying to work with people. Like, stop judging and shaming yourself for the decisions you're making. Some of them are made out of like old coping mechanisms, old survival instincts, and you're not necessarily in control of that all the time. And even once you're aware of it, it's still like, it's not just turning on or off a light switch. That shit takes years to change. And then also, even if you see, the problem with food is like it's an emotional attachment. People emotionally eat, especially like this last year has probably been the most stress eating and emotional eating ever in any recorded time. Like, because most other times that they were this stressful, there wasn't that much food. There was actual famines or wars or destructive forces, like a plague. But this is a few times when the world is falling to shit. But there's certainly a surplus of bad calories around. Yeah, at the height of comfort, like you can just sit in front of a screen all day and just stuff your face all day with bad, cheap food. And there's a reason, like, it's not more expensive to make healthier food. It's barely more expensive to buy healthier food.
No,
it's just the perception
of
it.
Yeah, and there's some ways where the only thing I can, I wouldn't even say argue, the only thing I can kind of agree with is sometimes it's generally more time expensive, not necessarily more money expensive. Because you're right. You can go buy, whether you're super carnivorous or super, plant-based, you can go get good quality ingredients, cook them up, and it's still cheaper than almost anything. It's that
almost anything.
It's the acquisition and the will to do so and the time.
And the lack of stimulus.
Yes.
Cooking it yourself is less stimulating than pushing a button and having it show up, or driving through a place and having it given to you.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you have, you have an average family, let's say you have one or two parents, you have a couple kids, you have people working crazy hours, working hard, struggling, and to sit down and think, okay, well, I'm going to steam this vegetable. I'm going to saute it with olive oil. I'm going to roast this thing and do this thing like this and portion it like this. It's like, or I'm going to drive through this place where I can listen to the radio yelling about how such and such politician is ruining the world, and
and how I should buy more stuff.
Yes, and be thinking about how I'm going to acquire more, sneakers.
Yeah,
it's tough, and I think we're all wired that as stress increases, we look for specific calorie sources that in nature not that available.
Yeah,
I mean, pick any part, whether we're in the tropics, whether we're in the frozen tundra, whether we're on the African plains. If you were an excellent hunter and had a really strong social skills, how much crap could you really get? What are you going to eat? Too much honey? Have too many seasonal fruit? That's as bad as it's going to get.
And there's built-in checks and balances. In order to get these things, you have to be physically active to do it. So you're burning calories to get more calories. So it's this constant cycle. And because we're all so comfortable, I mean, obviously I'm speaking from a place of like base level privilege. Like we're not in war-torn Yemen or something like that.
Right.
Like you're in a privileged area already. There's no actual hardship other than just like, the crushing weight of capitalism and depression of, life.
Right. But no impending actual doom. Right.
No doom that you need to daily take care of. So it's like, I don't know where I was going with that, but yes, it's super easy to just do nothing and get something. And it's like, I'm a business owner. I'm a single father. Like I understand like how stressful it is to manage the time, to even figure out how the time works when it seems like there's no possible way I can do my son's, help him with his homework, play, cook dinner, eat dinner, do the dishes, get him in a bath, get him dressed a bit, read, sing, go to bed. Like it's so much plus work. It is a lot and it's exhausting. So I get the urge to, well, fuck it. I'm just going to order something quick and cheap. I understand the urge, and the practice, once you, like most practices, once you just get used to it, it stops being so difficult. You adjust, and it's not super hard to make. I found this. To cook rice, steam or bake broccoli, and bake some chicken, the prep is 20 minutes.
Right.
It takes longer to get in your car, drive to the fast food place, order, and bring it back. It takes longer to do that than it does to cook chicken, rice, and broccoli.
Oh, yeah. It's just the foresight is that you thought ahead to buy chicken, rice, and broccoli and have it ready. And that's, I guess, the lesson that I have a hard time myself learning. So I don't want to be preaching about it, but is slight or delayed gratification. Now, for me, it's an easy lesson via our backgrounds of martial arts or fitness. We know it takes time. Right. You're not going to get that strong really quick. You're not going to have a great technique or martial prowess very quickly, but we kind of had that used to it. But we were culturally just used to, well, I'm hungry. There's food this second. I can close my eyes and it's right there.
Yeah. And you know, growing up, like we both grew up in the 80s, and I don't know how it was for you, but for me, like fast food was all the time. Fast food and frozen dinners. Like it was constant. You know, I had a single mom working, you know, 18 hours a day in the film industry, and like my grandmother was around, but like, you know, she's a lazy person.
Right.
So it was just, you know, it was constant frozen dinners, constant fast food. Like I grew up with that model, and it took me a while to unlearn it. But I think like anything, once you just make the decision, like you have to hit some sort of bottom, whatever your bottom is, and say like living like this is objectively harder and worse than putting in a little effort, but living much better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And once you can get to that point, you'll do whatever it is.
Yeah. I'm very fortunate that I had that experience because, so I grew up, my parents are from Iran. Pretty much most food was home cooked. You know, there's the occasional thing in here and there, but compared to most of my friends, we didn't really do much in the ways of fast food. Didn't really have soda in the house except for like parties. But really by high school, especially because of how much food, just the volume of calories that I would consume, being an athletic, just pig-faced monster. My mom was just tell me what you want me to buy. So that's when it was the Hot Pockets and just the classic wonderful commercial foods. But it was really after late teens, early 20s, when I wasn't being as athletic and I was being less healthy. And I just had a point where, at that point, I was smoking cigarettes. I just had a point where I was like, wait a minute, I really don't feel good. And a couple of years ago, people used to remark how insanely energetic I was all the time. Not like hyper, just like, dude, you never get tired. I had crazy physical stamina. And it just stopped. And I was like, wait a minute, why am I smoking? And why am I feeling thick, but not strong thick, just thick, and not like sexy thick, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Just not
like CK.
Not the kind that I liked.
2 C's.
Yeah. So I gave my boss at the time my cigarettes and said, if you see me smoke again, fire me. And I was lucky that though I was addicted, I don't have whatever predisposition to be, you know, a 10
physical addiction wasn't
10 out of
intense,
10 like critical. So I never touched it again and got back into the gym, hitting it hard. And then because of my now wife, I realized, okay, I know how to work out. I know about martial arts and I know like general eating principles, but I'm not studied in it. She got me a book that was a really nice start. It was The 4-Hour Body, which is a fun book, really interesting read. But what's even better about that book is that it's a really nice jumping off point because he references where he got his information.
Right.
So whatever thing, if you're interested in strength or in cardio or in weight loss, you at least have places to start that investigation. So it's not just, here's my plan, do the plan, you're going to be fit, that's it. It was like, well, here's what I did. Yeah. But here's what I didn't do. And here's the people I learned from. And, you know, like you as a person who's just sort of a information and cultural like junkie in a good way. I just dove in like a lunatic. Said, okay, I want to learn about diets and how they work. And because again, with a background in martial arts, I really like to understand like what's at the root of this.
Yeah, you know? Why?
Like
why and like, where does this come from?
Yeah, because in martial arts you learn all this weird stuff, and you're like, well, why would I use? What is this stance if I'm never gonna fight with a horse stance? What are we doing? And then eventually you find out, and you can decide if it's useful or not. But so I found it was really helpful to kind of. There's a couple different books and things that would really try to suggest instead of looking at even though it's not even a real actual practice, but Mediterranean versus paleo versus vegetarian versus vegan. Right. It was, well, what common threads do any of them have when they work correctly?
That's right.
And that helped me because, growing up with martial arts, I started with karate and then like a lot of people got into various arts. And then you come to a point where you think, well, what thread seems to hold the efficacy of some of these arts together? Right. So as you, as someone who's practiced multiple disciplines, could probably say, well, look, they all do their own thing, but here are the things that tend to work well generally. Right. Maybe for some people it'd be like being more aggressive, being more forward pressure, maybe having more off-angled footwork, having a fast first or second attack, whatever it is. Whether it's a center line control or a round movement style, but there's going to be some principles that tend to work more often than not.
Yeah.
And I found the same thing with exercise and with diet, and
100%.
And it was like, oh, okay. So instead of looking at, well, that's weird. Sometimes Graham likes rice, but this diet doesn't like rice. Well, it's like, well, Graham is measurably healthy. So instead of being a fool and saying rice isn't good, I should think, well, what's good about rice? And does rice behave
when and where does it serve me? Right.
It's like, I like rice. I'm Persian. I mean, it's part of our culture.
Yeah, it's in the diet.
Yeah, and I think probably the majority of the world consumes rice. And I found it fascinating that we were told when we were young, brown rice is healthy. I don't know that many cultures that's the majority of their food. I'm like, well, then what is this?
Yep.
And it's such a Western viewpoint to try and tell other cultures what's better.
Yeah.
We know you've eaten white rice for 1,000 years in China, but we're telling you it's brown rice.
It's the only time white culture said that something brown was better. It's the only time.
That's a keeper. That line is a keeper.
Thank you. Like what you're saying, the issue there, whether like when people go like, oh, I'm vegan or I'm a meat eater, whatever. I'm a Wing Chun person. I'm a boxing person. Is when you belong to a word, belong to a title. I'm a Christian. I'm a whatever. There is an inherent perversion of the self and information in general, because in order to belong to a word, you have to exclude information that is not included in that word. Whatever the definition is, you have to say, no, fuck that information. I can't have it because it's not in this thing that I say that I am. And so there's an inherent problem, and people do it all the time. Obviously both of us have a background in martial arts, and because we've studied multiple arts, you see like how insane people are. Like, no, fuck that. I do Krav Maga. Fuck everything else. And you're like, what is wrong with you? Right. Like, it's like the same. Someone's like, I'm Silat, man. You're like, okay, cool. I mean, that's fine. The same thing with whether it's religion or whatever. And now, over the last 10 years, that fitness has become kind of what it is, and you have fitness cults. You still there?
Yeah, sorry, just some other random call.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah. And now because there's like fitness cults that have like really big followings, and they do, yearly, their version of like their Olympics.
Right.
I'm talking about CrossFit.
Yeah.
It was subtle, but like then you get people who will oppose knowledge in fitness because it's different from the knowledge that they've been given. Or in diets too, like people who go like, oh, I'm vegan. You're like, okay, great. Usually it's moral reasons, and that's respectable. I get it. But then you go like, why don't you eat eggs? Like they're not killing an animal to get eggs, but they can't because it comes from an animal, and just it's the ideology that they're behind. It's not the science or the facts or even how it affects their body. Like you see, like I've been vegan. I know what happens to your body for most people when they're vegan.
Right.
And even in the face of that, like you're fucking sickly, huddled over in the corner. You can't walk up a flight of stairs. Like you're still not going to change? No, because I'm this thing.
Right.
And I get so locked into it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the lesson that I try to, and I will put a caveat that just about anything I say, I probably did not make up. Unfortunately, I'm not that clever, but luckily I've maybe synthesized some interesting points, or hopefully like useful points. I usually tell people first and foremost, before we even change, your nutritional approach, your diet, whatever that is, I'm like, let's see if we can upgrade the nature of the quality of whatever it is you want to consume.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for some things that might just mean a better version of it. Other things that might mean, let's see if you can make it instead of buying it. Like someone wants to have a cookie. I'm like, see what happens if you make the cookie. See what happens if you go to a bakery that makes it on site instead of in a box. Just see how you feel. That's all. Like just as an investigation. I'm like, let's go quality over, style or whatever first. So again, like in martial arts, someone says to me, yeah, this thing is bullshit. Wing Chun sucks. It's all about MMA or Krav Maga. And I said, okay, have you ever trained with someone who trains Wing Chun with the same amount of dedication as someone who trains whatever thing you're talking about? No. And I'm like, okay, so maybe you're judging lesser or lower quality training Wing Chun versus higher quality training anything else.
And the purpose of a drill, like you mentioned, a horse stance, and people would be like, well, what the fuck? You can't fight in a horse stance. It's like, that's right. It's not for fighting. It's a training tool. Like, you're strengthening your legs. You're learning about your hips and your core and your base. You're not going to run up against a fighter and get in a horse stance. And like, that's not the purpose of the drill.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, well, maybe there's a 5% chance that you could do that. That's not the design of the thing. Like in Chinese martial arts and Indonesian martial arts, by way of China, there's like animal styles.
Sure.
And the purpose is not to like necessarily fight like that, but the attributes in those styles are indicative of a certain skill set or reference a certain skill set, you know, whether it's explosivity or balance or evasive moves. So it's like you're trying to develop these skills with these tools. It's like you want to be the best jump rope person.
Right.
Or do you want the skill that you get the health benefits from jumping rope? Like, that's what you're really after.
Yeah. And also, what if, I've always said, even if there is an inferior system, proper execution will often trump bad execution in a better way. So I'd rather see someone do a perfect, you know, easy, simplified push-up on their knees or with their hands on a bench than a really shitty, quote unquote, real push-up where they're crunching their neck and they're all wide gripped and super weird. And I'm like, what the hell is that point of that?
Yeah, nothing. Yeah, it's the same thing when people are, you know, lifting heavier than they're ready for, whatever that weight is.
Right.
And let's say they're doing bicep curls and they're like bending forward at the waist, swinging it up, you know, pulling with their lower back. And you're like, not only are your risk of injury is high, but you're not even working the thing that you want to work in this movement. Like, the whole purpose is to do this one thing. And you know, bicep curl is a great example. Especially guys are, I want big biceps, I want big chest. Great. So how are you going to do that? Well, I'm going to grab this weight, put my elbows behind my ribs, bend with my lower back, and swing it up and not use my biceps at all. Like, okay, great. Good job.
Yeah. That's what's fun. That's when you start getting into that like idea of technique versus principle.
Yeah.
Someone's like, hey, you can learn the technique of curling a bicep, but if you learn the principle of what your bicep does, you're going to have a much bigger bag of tricks to develop it.
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends that bodybuild or did bodybuilding. Some of them don't do it anymore. And I always like to find out, well, how do they train? Because they were all having different variations of their training. I'm like, well, they're getting the same result. So it tells you that it's not exactly just not just this exact sequence on leg day and then this exact sequence on chest day. And it's not always the same split. Some of them don't do splits. Some of them train 6 days a week. Some of them have lots of cardio. So, you know, all these variations, yet they're netting a very similar result. So I thought, okay, well, what are the through lines of that? Well, you got to create tension. You got to push it hard. Yeah. You got to know what you're doing with form.
Yeah.
Sometimes even to a point where to the outsider, it doesn't look like it. I've seen a lot of people do what looks quote unquote sloppy or uncontrolled, yet it's very effective.
Certainly.
Just like in, you know, you watch UFC. How many of them actually move in a way that looks like it's quote unquote correct?
Right.
And then you get people saying, I don't get it. This guy sucks at boxing. No. He's not fighting the sport of boxing.
Did he win the fight?
Yeah.
Is he a good fighter?
He took some of the tools of boxing and applied to a totally different sport.
Yeah. Who gives a shit what it looks like?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Which brings me back to my point. See, there is such thing as bad food. So there you go. No, but it's interesting. I mean, there really is. I always like to, you know, give my clients a hard time when they say, is something good? Hey, I heard dairy's bad. And I always say, bad for what?
Exactly.
And they say bad for you. And I'm like, okay, explain bad for you. And I said, and what do you mean by dairy? So they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, do you mean pasteurized dairy, raw dairy, cow dairy, goat dairy?
And how much dairy? Right. How often are you consuming it?
Yes.
And what, like, are you cooking it or are you not? Yeah, exactly.
And I'm like, what is your goal? And I'm like, what are your other health considerations? I also love the question, is such and such thing healthy? And I'll often just say, can you define healthy?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, is it good for you? Good for you for what? You'd be like, well, I mean, my friend is healthy. I'm like, how do you know?
Yeah.
Your friend's thin? Your friend's muscular?
Yeah.
Your friend runs really fast? Or your friend seems to exhibit high tolerance to viruses and seems to be physically fit and have a good temperament and have social life that's acceptable and seems to treat others with high degree of ethics and integrity. Because there's a lot of stuff that gets with that, you know?
Yep. Yep.
And so
absolutely. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And so like, I don't necessarily know how much kale impacted any of those things for that person.
Well, and even there's a really great example too with kale. I mean, kale is objectively, quote, good for you. However, if you eat too much kale, you'll get a kidney stone. So it's like, it's not good. The food is not good.
Right.
It's not bad either. It's just food. It's something you can consume or not consume. That's what I mean. So it's like, to go back to it, I'm right. And that food is neither good nor bad. Like I had a client 2 years ago. And when we first started together, I never tell people to change their diet like you in the beginning.
Right.
The only thing I tell people right away is water. You need to drink water. Like that starts today. You don't have to start with a gallon, but most people drink no water. And you're like, okay, you need to start with some water. So everybody starts, okay, you have to have a glass within 30 minutes of waking up and then 30 minutes before bed. Those are the two, like you have to do that as some sort of structure here. I would like for you to do a glass every hour just to try to get in the habit of constantly drinking water. But again, it's a process, it takes time. Then so I had a client and she got the water thing, like within a month, she was just drinking water all day. She was just drink water. Great. Good job. Then I was like, okay, let's start to add in a little bit of diet change, nutrition change. So I want you you need some dark green vegetables in your diet. You have none right now. So you just need some. So add in some kale or spinach, just, once a day, just eat some kale and spinach, just put it in your fucking face.
Right.
She said, okay. And then, like 3 months later, she had a kidney stone. And I'm like, what happened? And she was like, well, I've been doing what you said. I've been eating kale. I was like, well, okay. But like, walk me through it. I eat like 3 of those big bags a week. It's like, that's too much. I didn't say eat all the kale. I said like 1 meal a day, have some kale.
Right.
So it's like, even this is an objectively good thing, but you can absolutely make it bad for you and even unhealthy for you. Same thing with water. You can die from too much water.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a fascinating thing that I was listening to, and it wasn't necessarily talking about nutrition, but they were talking about the idea of like ecosystem kind of co-evolution, that, for example, you have a group of whatever predatory animals like lions, and they go after such and such gazelle. Well, over time, through selective breeding, the gazelle will adapt to try to either be faster or to hide better or have better senses to detect lions. But then the lions will also co-adapt or just die and become faster themselves, stronger, et cetera, and they'll make each other stronger. So the idea with the things that are more or less, let's just use the term natural foods, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, meat products, et cetera, that probably are what people generally would have eaten for most of human history. Those things adapt as well. So for example, like I kind of joke with people, there's only a few things that we know are food. The rest we suspect are food. Okay.
Right.
And maybe people ate them, but it doesn't necessarily mean they were super harmonious or even species appropriate.
Right.
We do know that for some level of life, breast milk is food. How long? A lot of debate on that. How much? Whatever. But we know that that's probably a basic human food.
Yeah.
As it is for, I believe, all mammals, maybe with some weird exception.
Well, and it's very easy to evidence that in that the breast milk doesn't appear until a baby appears too. You know what I mean? Like it's not there all the time.
Probably not a lot of 40-year-olds. We're still getting it.
Quick side note: do you know that you can find tons of videos of like parents, women still breastfeeding their kids at like 10, 12?
Sure.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, hey, whatever, So I mean,
no, it's not okay.
That to me is less weird than the idea that it's okay to give someone like like a can of Coke.
I agree with that.
I'd be like, whoa.
It's so not intense. Less weird. It's not less weird, but they're both bad. If a kid can say, "Hey, mom, can I suck on your tit right now?" Like that'd be great.
Wait, did you just call those both bad foods? Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah, that's what I said. Breast milk is the same as soda. Exactly.
So Graham Baker said breast milk is bad food. Okay.
That's what I said. Yeah.
So yeah, the idea that we would kind of co-evolve. So, so the only other thing that we are pretty aware of is, to some extent, fruit benefits from us eating it because we shit out the seeds and the seeds will grow.
Right.
Vegetables generally, and maybe there are some things that I'm not aware of, but for the most part, as vegetables aren't seeded, they don't get a lot of benefit from us eating them, other than we will then plant more vegetables.
Right.
Animals, one benefit of us eating them, if there is one, is that
ecosystem controls the population.
We'll call out the weak.
Yeah.
So I always kind of tease my clients. I said, nuts don't want to be eaten. Vegetables don't want to be eaten. And I'm like, but a gazelle definitely wants you to eat his pussy little brother.
Yes, it can live.
Don't want to get eaten, right?
Yeah.
And I said, most animals, most mammals, when they breastfeed, there's a certain point where they're uncomfortable until they're able to feed the child.
Yeah.
So I kind of like to give people a hard time even with vegetables, not so much to say, no, don't eat vegetables, as it's okay to question all things. So when someone says, hey, I know fruits are healthy, why are you telling me not to have an acai bowl? And I say, well, I'm not telling you not to, I'm just teasing you. But also, how do you know it's healthy?
Yeah.
Like, don't listen to someone telling you. What is telling you for sure? Because, again, not that nature was inherently perfect, but I don't know that many models in nature where you'd be able to have the equivalent of a Jamba Juice. Even when it was seasonal, you might have 10 oranges because that's what's around. But you're not going to have 13 with ice cream in them. Right? Exactly.
And it's a big difference. Like an orange, super good for you. Right. And it's got fiber and vitamins and great. And it tastes good. Right. It has healthy sugar. Right. Awesome. But yeah, a giant glass of orange juice, not good for you now.
No.
You're just drinking a giant glass of sugar at this point. And it doesn't, and there's a certain, obviously, like, natural sugar is objectively better for your body than processed sugar. But there is a point where it's just sugar in your body now.
Yes.
Insulin's still spiking in crazy, unnatural ways for you. Excess is still going to be converted to fat. Like, same thing with protein. People are like, I'm just going to eat fucking nonstop chicken, but why am I still fat? Because you're eating too much chicken. Like, you're not burning this much, so the excess is converted to sugar. The sugar is converted to fat, and now you're still fat, even though you're eating a lot of chicken.
Right, and that's chicken was a fun one for me because though I'm a almost shockingly carnivorous person, I really don't consume a lot of chicken. And my clients are like, "Oh, but I don't understand. I'm eating all this chicken and brown rice and the typical stuff." I said, "Yeah, you don't really need to eat chicken that much." I'm like, "If you like it, it's fine. If it's they're like, well, why?" I'm like, "Well, per calorie, doesn't have as many vitamins. The fats that are in it, if you're eating ones with fat, the fat quality, we seem to do much better on the fats that are either in seafood or in grass-consuming, like ruminant-type mammals, even more than other mammals. So, like, there's a reason that bison is healthier than even a high-quality, outdoor-raised pig. I'm not talking about the feedlot, like, frightening pork that is most of it, but you can get really good heritage-quality pork, but still the fat quality itself compared to ruminant-type mammals different. And the same thing with, like, cold water fish, whether we're talking salmon or sardines, things like that, or some of the other interesting shellfish. We just seem to have better adaptation for those omega-3 fats compared to, chicken. And
well, we is a very kind of shaky term too, because it's like not only like your genetics, but your epigenetics, what your ancestors ate is going to influence how you eat and what. That's what it's like when people try to control their diet or their nutrition with no kind of like objective reasoning about how they feel about their ethnicity and like what their ancestors ate. Well, there are people who came from a line of people who ate whale blubber, and when they eat it, they process it fine. Right. And there are people who've never even seen a fucking whale, and if they eat it, they might not do so well with it.
Oh yeah,
just you said, like, go ahead.
No, absolutely. I mean, even when people say, "Hey, I know you like this," I don't feel good on it. I'm like, well, then you should.
And it's not for you.
And I said, then there's two options: it's not for you, or the system isn't working properly. And if we don't have any reason to believe the system isn't working properly, like if you have digestive issues, then it might be hard to digest anything.
Yeah.
But if your digestion seems to be healthy and normal and something doesn't work for you, then it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what is going to work. You know, if someone loves cardio, even though I think they might overdo it, if they love it that much, I'm like, well, then why don't we just make it safer? Like,
exactly. As long as it's not hurting you,
Yeah.
then yeah, you're. It's like when I'm teaching people how to fight basic self-defense issues, this is how I approach it. And here's a bunch of tools. Here are like objective realities of what your body structure means and where you're the most strong or the most weak based on positioning. And here's how angles can help you. But if you're like, I have a student when I'd be working in classes, angling, he would do the drills, but when we would fight, he just liked to run straight in. He didn't give a fuck if he got hit. He's just and I'm like, okay, man, well, let's figure out how to make this work the best for you. So as you're running in, because that's who you are, that's what you want to do, and most of the time it's fairly effective for you. But let's try to prevent you from getting knocked out on the way in or on the way out. So it's like, I'm not going to change who you are fundamentally. This is how your brain processes information, emotionally, how you react in a fight. Cool. I can't make you me. I don't do that. I mean, sometimes I do, but most of the time I don't.
Right.
So yeah, like when people with their diet, like I want to be vegan or a meat eater or whatever it is, it's usually vegans, but like for ethical reasons, which I respect, it's a nice thought. It's a little, absent-minded because like you're killing animals also to be a vegan.
Right.
But like, how is it affecting your body? I mean, I know very few vegans, and when I was a vegan, I became anemic, and I was like on top of my shit, making sure I got this, making sure I got that, supplementing things I didn't get. But my body was just like, nope, it's not right for us. Like I was weak. I was not healing. I'd get tired after I ate. Like it wasn't right. So I addressed it and said, okay, I need red meat. That's how my body works. And that's that.
Yeah. It's strange how different, there's people I know who just have a natural disposition to really, really like seafood a lot more than others.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I'm sure you've met many who were like, I don't do seafood.
Yeah.
And they're like, unless it's sushi
I know.
or like a tuna melt. And I'm like, okay, yeah. I understand. Yes. If you're in LA, you are obligated to like sushi. And particularly if it's not authentic.
Yeah. I just want something that's fried, wrapped in something with a bunch of sugar sauce on it.
Yes. Yeah, and you're like, you mean like water donuts? That's what you want?
Yeah.
Ocean.
This is not, you're not really eating sushi at this point. Like, yeah.
It's tricky. It's tricky because there's also like this, the thing I'll run into is because I try to have a generally higher, higher quality stuff, even if I'm going to have stuff that's more fun than others, even if something isn't going to fuel my body or be optimal for my, my cognitive function, I'm like, okay, I still would rather it be higher quality. What's tricky is there's so many things that are part of our culture that they're just not that available. Like there isn't a lot of, at least where I live in the areas I'm familiar with, there isn't a lot of like heirloom wheat, fried in, tallow donuts. It's pretty much donuts or donuts. And if you want that, you're like, well, I'm not going to go buy a 50-pound bag of heirloom wheat, buy tallow. Like, you know what? Okay. So I just don't get donuts. I mean, I don't personally care that much about donuts, but I mean, as an example.
I mean, well, part of the issue here too is like it in the States, it's an issue because there is no cultural food or cultural history with food in this country. It's all coming from somewhere else.
Right.
So it's like, because of the American or the United States model of ruining everything and like making it a way to generate money, all the cultural value is thrown away or taken away. And then it's replaced with what is cheapest to keep it going. And how do I exploit it to the highest degree? So it's like, there's nothing intrinsically American about healthy food. So it's just, it's harder to come by.
Yeah. And also I wonder, cause I think some of the, like non-obvious or not sort of stereotyped Southern food, like the more real proper tradition Southern food, when there was, say 150 years ago, there was really not a lot of ingredients you could have that weren't at least reasonably digestible, let alone probably pretty good for you. There was probably flour, but we're still talking about like much better yielded sprouted wheat as opposed to this kind of crap wheat that we use now.
People had to make the flour then.
Yes. Yeah, and they had to
And now
mill
that's
it,
not
and
the
it
issue.
was fermented
Yeah.
and all this cool stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like there's probably some resurgence in looking into those things because it's feels like we don't have that. But I
Yeah.
think there are probably historians and chefs who are literally looking at like, well, wait, what is the, kind of the way that 15 or so years ago, farm to table was becoming a big thing.
Right.
That I'm assuming there's definitely like in the southern region, places that are really looking at, like historically relevant cuisine, though of course all influenced from different countries, but
Yeah.
tempered by local available ingredients. Because I remember watching something talking about the way that certain southern barbecues were set up really came from Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and that the main difference was that we just had different ingredients here. So
Yeah.
we were restructuring, what do you call it, recipes just with different ingredients. So different green base, different,
Yeah.
legumes and all these.
I mean, Southern food is black food.
Yeah.
Obviously it's terrible. You can't even talk about it without talking about enslaved black people in this country. But like they were the ones cooking. They created the Southern cuisine. It all comes from them. So yeah, of course it's dramatically influenced by various African countries and their cuisine there.
Oh yeah, and I imagine that's what's interesting to me about cuisine is that you have certain key structures that seem to work. There's certain things that are not immutable, but that are general principles, like some level of acidity, some level of fattiness, some level of this, some level of that. But then every region has to adjust it to their available ingredients.
Exactly.
And
exactly
how different those ingredients can be. You have places that have such a vast amount of excellent produce because the climate. So like certain regions of Mexico and now because of our agriculture, certain parts of California have so many available ingredients. And then areas where it's a lot less diverse, like, let's say some of the colder parts of the Nordic nations, but they still approach the idea of the components somewhat.
The basics are all there.
Yes. And it's really interesting.
There.
And it tells me that in those basics, there is an inherent formula that says this is nourishing, that these things together, because they can omit stuff. They could just boil something. Like, all right, that's all there is. It's like, no, this all stuff tastes good because you're tasting the actual land where you are. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And just through evolution, it's like we learn to eat through trial and error.
Oh yeah.
The things that killed us, we stopped eating.
Right.
And then the things we could eat, we kept eating. So that information got passed down. It's like, these things are okay, these things are not. So it's like, that's what I think that, to argue against the point that we're not sure what's food or what's not, like for the most part, unless we're forcing the issue of like, no, you can deep fry a Twinkie. That's food.
Right.
That's not food. But like for the most part, like fruits, vegetables, some sort of protein, some sort of acidity, like you said, like these are kind of building blocks to everybody's nutrition globally. It doesn't matter what cultural background there is. Like everybody more or less has this thing.
Yeah, there's this awesome book called Deep Nutrition, and she kind of does that. It takes kind of a historical context and says, for the most part, and I think there might not be any real long-term or large-scale, exceptions, that basically all cultures had more or less these four principles, which was whatever animal they ate as much of it as they could, like as far as the whole animal. Even cultures that ate a lot less animals, they still tried to eat as many pieces of it as possible.
Right.
That there were some degree of raw foods, some degree of fermented foods, and then making sure that there was also things eaten from animals, including parts that have to do with bones and tissue and organs and the whole deal. But I thought, oh, that's interesting because I've experienced with Persian food, and I'm like, oh yeah, we use lamb shanks with bones. We have yogurt, which is fermented, and then unfermented fruits and vegetables all the time, kind of sauerkraut type of stuff. And then things that are soaked, things that are fresh. Like, oh, that's, and I think that transposes just about every culture, even ones that have very different styles.
Yeah, and that seems to be a big problem with like American diet is lack of fermented food, and then lack of like unprocessed or clean ingredients in general, but in particular like some sort of protein source.
Oh yeah, it's a trip. Sorry, I'm just getting all these alerts, and I have them on just because the sound goes off if I turn them off for us.
Yeah.
Nothing to worry about. Just some kind of nuclear meltdown in my gym or whatever. Anyway,
Sweet.
But yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, I wonder, because I like to kind of devil's advocate my friends and clients when someone says, but plants versus animals. I said, well,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure over 95% of animals are edible, and I don't think more than 10% of plants are edible. So, do with that what you will. But if push comes to shove, I'm going to eat the squirrel first, and then the bush second.
I mean, there is a reason, like it's hard if you look like just evolutionary, it's hard to catch, kill, and cook an animal.
Right.
There's a reason why everybody across the world worked so hard to figure out a good way to do it.
Right.
Like there's a significant benefit to like, oh, we're eating meat and we're getting bigger and stronger.
Right.
And we can sustain ourselves longer. And again, like there are healthy vegans. They exist.
Of course they do. Yeah.
Just there are no, I can't even make the argument there are more unhealthy ones because there are more unhealthy
People.
meat eaters than healthy ones. Just in general, yeah, there's more unhealthy people. But like, not having any meat is a tough sell for most people's bodies. Forget about whatever emotional point of view you have. Like I don't agree with Western, mass farming or what is it? Factory farming processes.
No, it's nightmarish.
They're not good. Yeah, it's a hellscape. So I buy from local butchers who at least tell me they're getting it from local sourced humanely, whatever.
Right.
There's a reason why it's like objectively this is kind of the norm.
Yeah, and I think that there's, again, like we mentioned with some of the belief systems that people put on a label, and it's like, if you're not this, then you're bad. Well, if you're not, like, I've heard people on both sides, and I'll make that clear, on the more paleo carnivore type, low carby type side, and on the more plant-based side, saying the opposite is inherently bad. Like any vegan is unhealthy. Oh, anyone who eats meat is a murdering piece of shit. I'm like, that doesn't really seem to be either true or, more to the point, helpful. Like, how is that going to solve anything?
Such a good point. Definitely not helpful. Yeah.
So I've always found, well, what common ground? Is there any common ground? Common ground. Let's care about the environment. Okay.
Yeah.
If most people are going to end up eating meat anyway, how do we make it more sustainable? Okay.
Right.
One avenue, not necessarily my favorite, but one avenue is lab grown meat. The other avenue is proper regenerative farming practices. Then you get people arguing that those aren't possible. Okay. Well, then we have to investigate that, because
we have to figure something.
You're going to knock yourself out if you just try and say, well, everybody has to be plant-based. Like, there's like 1 or 2% of people who are willing to do that. That's too many people.
And here's the other thing too, right? There are 9 billion people. Let's say everybody just overnight, we're all plant-based and we're all cool with it. That means that the factory farming of plants has to go up massively too.
I mean, unbelievably, just to get enough calories. Like, you can't
And you're just, okay, you're going to replace all the meat factories with fruit and vegetable factories. Fine. Great. You need way more of them because we need to consume far more to just sustain ourselves. And then the emissions don't lower. You're still driving these things around. You're still, machines to chop and, process these things. You're still killing. And now you need way more space. So you're going to murder far more deer, rat, foxes, ground nesting birds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You're going to take out forests to plant. There's no naturally occurring field of soy. How do you think they get there? They're murdering animals to plant these things.
Yeah.
And then it's not like they just kill some and then that's it. They have to keep killing them because those animals want to eat what you're growing, and you have to kill them to stop them from doing it.
Oh, yeah. And then when they bomb it with pesticide, it doesn't just stop bugs. Some of those bugs get eaten by mice, by birds. Those mice and birds die. The squirrels that eat those die. The thing that eats the mouse dies. A cat goes and eats the bird, and someone kills the cat, and boy, oh boy, they're gonna have a problem with this guy right here.
And it's like, so it's like, again, morally, it's a noble thought.
Yes,
it's just ill-informed and poorly executed.
Yes, because I mean, I can't imagine how much, fruit and vegetables,
right,
would you have to grow? Because obviously, our densest calories are going to come from fat, and if we're looking at plant-based fat sources,
everybody's just bathing in avocado.
Yeah, avocados, olives, coconuts,
almonds.
And since that's difficult to do, it's like, what, we're just going to have a world running on like canola oil and soybean oil. Like that's wow. That's when you get into that whole conspiracy theory nonsense of like population control. You want to decimate a population, put everyone on a massive amount of soybean oil and watch what happens.
Yeah. And so I tell people all the time, like when I get vegetarians or vegans, I'm like, that's fine. We need to kind of like balance, check a little bit of what's going on. Cause it's just so much soy and they don't understand why they're so unhealthy. They have so many health problems. I'm like, well, you're eating too much soy. Like even for a vegan or a vegetarian, this is too much.
Yeah. It's too much. If it's good quality and it's fermented or it's properly handled, I'm not one of those people that thinks like no one, just because I'm a meat person doesn't mean I think like you can never eat tofu. It's like, no.
Of course not.
If you get organic tofu and you like it sometime, you're not going to die. If you want to have some fermented miso paste and things that add interesting flavors and textures, especially to culturally relevant foods, those are can be done very, very fine. But you're right. Like if cheap quality, Roundup bombarded soy is the bulk of someone's diet. Again, it comes down to that whole quality thing. It's the same as if someone says, well, I eat meat. It's like, but all you're eating is like Hormel sausages.
That's not meat. It's not meat.
Right.
Well, the other thing too, like you go like, okay, tofu. Okay, cool. I have tofu sometimes every once in a while. Not a lot, every once in a while.
Sure.
By itself, tofu doesn't taste like anything. So you have to cook it with things or put something on it.
Right.
So if you're not cooking it with vegetables, that means you're putting something on it. And what are you putting on it? Some sort of dressing? What's the dressing? Sugar. So it's just a vehicle for processed sugar now.
Yes.
Or you're frying it.
Yeah, exactly. So you're like, kind of shooting yourself in the foot with this.
Yeah, this is no longer a healthy option now. No. It's nonsense.
Yeah, it's very rare someone's like, no, I had a really good salad with tofu in it. You're like, I don't actually remember the last time I ever heard anyone say salad and tofu together. Mostly because it'd be weird.
Well, and that's the thing, like you mentioned the cultural aspects of tofu. Cultures that eat tofu, like whether it's Japanese, Chinese, Thai, Vietnamese, it's always tofu with a ton of vegetables, tofu with protein, tofu with, you know what I mean? Like there's always other things. It's only here, like this country is just, whether you're talking about martial arts or diet or nutrition or whatever, like we're the leader in taking a concept, having little to no understanding, and then running with it and basing an ideology upon just like our feeling about it.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
No evidence of it.
No, it's like someone once said the greatest American art form is marketing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like,
sucks.
I mean, think about how silly the idea is of a superfood. When people say, I heard it's a superfood, I'm like, you mean like it has x-ray vision? What do you mean a superfood?
Yeah.
You're telling me papayas are somehow magical? Oh, no, it's turmeric. Oh, turmeric. I mean, turmeric. And I'm like, I'm Persian. We use it in our food, but it's not magical. We just cook with it because it has a taste and it's regionally there.
And you go like, yes, is it good? Does it have health benefits? Sure. Most things do. Right. Like, unless, you know what I mean? Like, there's no one thing. It's like, whatever it is, like, what's the one exercise that'll get me like completely shredded and like ripped, like every muscle? What's the one exercise? There's no one exercise. Like there's thousands of exercises and we use all of them over just up and down, like kind of pulling it based on what we want. And they'll all play a role in you being shredded or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, that's just diet, but like they'll all play a role in muscles.
Yeah. Maybe if you can suplex like a bear and do that for reps, you'll probably get shredded. I just don't know.
It's a good full body workout.
Yeah, I just don't know if you can do it. I think, when someone says superfood, I'm like, I think maybe the only thing I'd call a superfood is probably good quality salt, because I don't think there's anything that is more flexible in its use than a pinch of salt. You got something good, you cook a steak, not that good without salt. And I love steak.
Yeah.
You got chicken, need some salt.
Yeah, but then again, it's even not that super, because too much of it and it'll fuck you up too.
Oh yeah, and also like too much tastes nasty.
So bad.
You go touch over, it's just hurt. So
unless you're in Florida, those motherfuckers love salt.
Really?
Oh my God! Like every time I go to Florida, I'd always have to, like, if I order food somewhere, if we go out, I always have to say like, can I have no salt? on mine.
Really?
Because everything is so intensely salted. It's like being back east, like with my mom's side of the family, like in Jersey,
Right.
who just like dumps salt over everything. It's that level.
You
but
think is that
everywhere you go?
Do you think that's a response to humidity, or is there just a higher?
Oh, that's interesting.
I'm wondering because
I don't know.
Because I know, like, I like to cycle on and off, not like with measure. Just I like to do sometimes really go low carb for a long time, and even before I was aware of it, I would always find when I would decrease carbohydrates a lot, I would just desire more salt. And then everything, you know, after years of studying, you know, people who are experts in keto, not just like sort of the fad version, but actually have years and years of practice. They're like, no, you have to have more electrolytes as you decrease carbohydrates, because you won't be able to hold water the same. You will not be
You
hydrated.
literally need salt to live.
Yes. And you need to increase it accordingly, safely, as you cut down carbohydrates, especially when you get carbohydrates closer and closer to, you know, approaching zero. And I mean net carbs, not like lettuce. But obviously I don't think Florida or New Jersey are particularly by nature lower carbs, but I wonder if because of the abundant moisture, they might just sweat more. And
maybe, I mean, that might be a decent question as to how it started.
Right.
I definitely don't think that's why it's continuing. It's just like how they're indulgence and what they're used to.
Yeah. It also could be like in places where you have higher alcohol consumption and smoking, those blunt taste a bit. Because I remember like typically, you know, probably not as much today, but even up to years ago, you would see people who were chefs, you know, because they had, you know, nighttime style living, more likely were smokers than not, especially kind of the further you go back. And I would always kind of say, one of the big differences between like a healthy type restaurant and not is the punch of flavor. Yeah. And I'm like, because a healthy chef isn't going to probably use salt and butter to that flavorful punch, because their taste buds are actually less impacted by, you know, drinking quite a bit and smoking cigarettes. Or even when I used to be a smoker, and I've always been a salt person anyway, but when I was a smoker, I needed even stronger flavor profiles because you're blunting your mouth.
And there is just like, you know, like all things, we adapt fairly quickly. So when your diet when you're eating lower quality food, the taste is less. So you want more shit on top of it. And then when you start eating healthier food, cleaner food, it tastes bland at first. And then just over time, you know, 8 weeks, you go like, oh, this is so flavorful now. And even like the smallest bit of additive is like, I don't like, this is weird now. It tastes really bizarre. I remember like, in like 2005, 6, 7, I was vegetarian and vegan. And then when I started eating meat, I was still just only eating like mostly raw food, which I don't recommend raw diets, but like it's what I was trying.
Sure. I did it too.
And and I remember I was somewhere and somebody had McDonald's French fries, and I hadn't eaten fast food in like, I don't know, 10 years at this point. And everything I was eating was really clean. And they're like, have one. I was like, I'm not going to eat that. But I was like, I'll try like a bite, like a quarter of a French fry. And it literally tasted like medicine. I was like, this tastes like fucking Robitussin. Like it's just bitter chemicals. I don't taste potato. Nothing. I don't even taste salt. I just taste medicine. Like it was intense. Yeah. And it really shook my mind up. Like, oh, this is not, like when you said like some things aren't food. I was like, this is not food. This is absolutely not food.
Right.
It doesn't taste like food. There's nothing in here that's food.
No, it's a trip. Whenever I would do like, you know, I would say, okay, I'm going to go 0 carbs for a while, just for fun, you know?
Yeah.
You do it for 2, 4, 6 weeks, like you said, and then eat something simple.
Yeah.
Like a grape, a blueberry. And it feels like it's so good. It's so sweet. It's amazing.
Fucking explosion.
You realize like, oh, right. Fruit can be nature's dessert, not just something you just shove in your mouth all the time because you're at 7-Eleven. That's all they had.
Yeah.
And it's so cool. Like you know, as much as I don't like to overly push anything, people who I think can have a healthy relationship with food, not people who are likely to be obsessive.
Yeah.
I think cycling on and off of somewhat restrictive things safely actually gives you a lot of insight into
I agree.
what food really can be. So if someone's like, I've been eating too much fish, it's like, oh, take a week off, take 2 weeks, take a month off, and then have a nice piece of really good fish. Oh, I ate too much sugar. Don't have sugar for a month. See what happens. Then go eat a banana and you'll go crazy. Or have a date. You'll have a date and you'll think you just like got punched in the mouth. It's so sweet.
I don't use like white sugar in the house, and like for dessert. And I never tell my son that like this is candy or this is like, he's always had fruit. He come in like, Daddy, can I have an apple? Daddy, can I have blueberries? Like that's what we eat. Wednesday I cut up a pineapple, and we ate it, that night and then the next day, and it was just so sweet. It's just a fucking pineapple. This is regular old pineapple. But I was like, damn, this pineapple is like almost too sweet.
Right.
So it's like, if I have a donut or something like that, I'm like, what the fuck is happening here? This is insane.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to, in a minute, I got to take off, but I want to leave you with a prompt so we can talk again. And I think this will be fun, particularly for us. Next time, let's discuss what is our top most controversial opinion.
Ooh.
Yes.
Okay, I got a couple. Right away, I got a couple.
I got a couple, but I think we want to sit and be like, let's get into some hot water with this one.
I'd love it, man. I'd love it.
I do want to say I really appreciate your time. I'm always love seeing the kindness and generosity of time you have with your people in your life. How beautiful your relationship is with your son is very inspiring. As a martial artist, as a trainer, as a dude, as a nerd culture guy, just all the stuff is very heartwarming. And I think your journey is one that is definitely in the direction of good. So I appreciate that all the time.
Thank you, brother. That's a tall and intense compliment, and I really appreciate you. I feel everything you just said exactly the same about you. You're without a doubt one of the good ones, objectively good.
Thanks.
All right, brother. Don't forget to check out Cyrus _Legion_Gym.
Yeah.
On Instagram. He's a good dude. Hit him up if you're in the area. Go check out his gym. It is sexy.
All right. So have a good.
All right.
We'll talk again soon, buddy.
Yes, sir. Peace out. All right. Be well, do good, make healthy choices. Peace.